Hello, welcome back to Division I Rejects. I'm your host, Kobe Manzo. This is D1R 191. We're back. Little bit of a hiatus, little bit of a break in the offseason. I figure the national championship at the D3 level to the Super Bowl at the NFL level, let it breathe. Give it a little bit of rest. But I hope you're not sick of us because we're back, getting back into the swing of things here. A podcast every single week coming to you this Tuesday, filming the night of February 10th. Like I said, this is D1R 191. I'm your host, Kobe Manzo. Joining me tonight, I got a fantastic guest at the D2 level. Not a player, not a coach, but a commissioner at the D2 level from arguably the best conference in D2 football right now. I would be the one arguing it right now. From the MIAA, Mike Racy joins me here in the show here just in a little bit. Excited to talk with him about his thoughts on everything MIAA, but as far as the grand scheme of D2 football and everything that comes along with some new proposals being passed by the NCAA, especially when it comes to the potential expansion of the D2 football playoff. He's got some great input and opinion on that. Had a referee from that conference. It just was part of the officiating crew in the Super Bowl. A lot of big things happening in that conference. So excited to have Mike on. Excited to get back into the swing of things on the podcast here. But outside of that, we got some new D2 head coaches. I'm going to highlight 4 of them later in the podcast episode tonight. There's a lot more than 4 new head coaches across the landscape. I'm going to pick out 4 of what I think are maybe some of the most promising jobs right now, and maybe in the future we'll highlight some more of those guys. Also, at the D3 level, we've got the D3 impact on coaching the big game, that being the Super Bowl. A lot of Division III ties, not so much on the rosters. There was one D3 football player from, I believe it was Greenville, that on the Eagles there, but on the coaching staffs for both the Chiefs and the Eagles, a lot of those guys having Division III ties, playing and or coaching at the D3 level. So we'll discuss and break down a lot of that, here from Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo on the Chiefs side over there, and talk about their roots when it comes to Division III football and coaching at the small school level for Andy Reid there. But other than that, some WIAC coaching carousel news, some prominent faces in Wisconsin's D3 conference that are switching, having a little bit of change of scenery that'll impact the league going into next year. And finally, the return of a cross-divisional rivalry, a D2 NAIA matchup in the state of Indiana that I'm really excited to talk about, something that's coming back. So stay tuned for that one. But otherwise, that's it really for this episode. I mean, we're getting right back into it. Excited to start jumping into some off-season content. If you guys have ideas on some things we should cover or some other storylines, we will talk about the man, TP from Middlebury, the Division III offensive lineman from the East-West Shrine Bowl. We've been gone for a little while. We got to talk about him a little bit. You know we got to touch on that one. Thomas Perry, some of the clips were going viral of him taking down some Power 5 type competition at the Shrine Bowl. So we'll talk about him as well. Don't worry. But otherwise, if you got some stuff you want us to cover, please let us know. Otherwise, if you're watching on YouTube, those timestamps, video chapters right at the description, you can use the little red line to fast forward to any part of the video you want to tap into. Otherwise, listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you name it. Follow us on the socials. Let's get right into this one. All right, joining me on the show tonight, he's the man in charge of what is shaped up to be, in my mind, the current frontrunner for Best Football Conference in Division II. He's one of the best follows on social media for small school sports. It's the commish, Mike Racy. What's going on, man?
How you doing, Kobe?
Dude, excited to get you on here. You've been a guy that I know I've followed along with for a very long time, and especially after this season, you know, the thoughts and the knowledge that you put out onto social has been just incredible from my standpoint. So thank you for that, and also thank you for coming on. Excited to get you on here, man.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate what you guys are doing for small college football, and it's great that we finally connect.
Absolutely. Felt like it was just destined to happen at some point. No time like the present. And to start things off, Super Bowl Sunday being yesterday as we record this on a Monday night, and one thing that was really unique about that you had put out on social and made me aware of, for Super Bowl 59, one of the members of the officiating crew had a pretty, humble beginning coming from Pitt State. Talk to me about the MIAA and Pitt State alum Mark Stewart.
Yeah, Mark is one of, I think, currently 8 officials in the NFL, 8 active officials that have an MIAA background. Awesome. Interesting, Mark is actually one of 4 from Pittsburgh State. Wow. So we've got 4 gorillas running up and down the field every Sunday in the NFL, and I think it just really speaks to the strength of our conference, not just on the field with our student athletes, but also our officials. We've got I think the best supervisor of officials in Division II. that's working for the MIAA, and Phil Laurie. Phil spent a number of years officiating for both the Big 8 and then the Big 12. Worked big-time bowl games, worked a couple of national championships. Now he's, recruiting, teaching, evaluating MIAA officials. And, his work is not only producing officials that are moving on into the FCS and FBS conferences. A number of former officials, have moved on to Division I, a bigger paycheck. But as I said, officials that recently working MIAA that are now in the NFL. And that's what I love about what we do in Division II and Division III football. A lot of people don't realize, a lot of people don't take time to think about, how many of our officials and coaches and administrators find themselves working in professional football. It's not just our student athletes that are making that jump. It's the professionals that help run the league and the coaches that got their start in Division II or Division III. And you and I traded a couple of text messages also about the number of small college football players that were on the Super Bowl rosters. So I know you say it all the time. They'll find you, compete hard wherever you're at, or work hard wherever you're at. And it's true for our officials too. If you do a good job, you're going to get seen, and you're going to have a chance to move up.
I think that's the cool part about that, is that always gets associated with the player's mindset, right? Of, you're good enough, they'll find you. That's like putting tape out there. But from a coaching perspective, from an officials, from an admin perspective, there's a lot of those people that make those jumps. And we're talking about later in the episode a long list of former Division III football players not playing in the Super Bowl, but on both coaching staffs. And I think that's a really neat jump to see that. And Sirianni has been at the forefront of that, Steve Spagnuolo. But there's other guys that make up those staffs that have had some really strong Division III roots. And I kind of wanted to talk about the instant replay edition a little bit later, but it kind of feels like it comes in right here and makes sense now. I wanted to ask about your involvement with the officiating crew inside of the MIAA and your relationship with them, and how has that changed? Not saying the relationship has changed, but how has that helped you guys implement this idea of the instant replay at the D2 level? Because that's been kind of an experimental piece added recently.
Yeah, we're really proud of the work, Kobe, that we've been able to do on the replay front. We've worked with a company out in Louisiana called Sky Coach. Mm-hmm. They got their first experience in replay working for the Canadian Football League. They handle all of their replay, and that was brought to my attention about 3 years ago. And the thing that I really liked about what they were doing was that it didn't require you to have a replay booth. And a big expense in equipment, and then having additional personnel to run the replay equipment in a booth. This system that we use actually puts the decision making on whether a call is upheld or it's overturned. It's the officials on the field that are looking at an iPad from different replay cameras we have set up around the stadium. And we had to go to the NCAA, Kobe, 3 years ago to get a special exemption to be able to do replay in that manner, where it wasn't in a replay booth, that it was actually being done through an iPad on the field. And we were able to get an exception to pilot test it 3 years ago. And we had so much success after that first year that the NCAA rewrote the replay rule, where you could do it either way. You could do it in a replay booth like FCS and FBS does, most of them, or you could do it like a lot of D2 and D3 and now NAIA conferences are doing with Sky Coach technology or something like that, where you have replay actually on the field. Yep. And, a couple of stats, Kobe, in year one, we were at 2 cameras for replay. This past year, we were at 4 cameras. So we went from 2 to 3 to 4. So we've got 4 different views of every play We can zoom in, zoom out, fast forward, rewind. You can fast forward at one angle and then pick up another camera angle at that exact point. So a lot of great technology. And when you look at over the 3 years, we've had 177 coaches challenges or targeting calls, and 62 of them have been overturned.
Wow.
So that's about a 35% success rate for our coaches, or for a targeting call where the call on the field is looked at and it's overturned. And Kobe, you know how big the targeting issue is.
Absolutely.
You know, to have a call that the penalty is for a student athlete to be ejected, to be able to give it a second look. And a lot of those calls in real time look like a very dangerous hit that meet all of the requirements of a targeting call.
Absolutely.
You go back and look at it, and you're going to see that it's not the helmet to helmet, crown of the helmet contact that you need, and we're able to put that student athlete back in the game. So replay has done a great deal for our conference, just in helping our officials make sure that they have all the tools they need to get these calls right. And we've got big games, we got big plays. We want to make sure we're using all the technology we can to get as many of these calls right as possible.
Especially when the margin of error in that conference right now, I mean, it's not very much, man, right now. You talk about the top to the bottom, and everyone loves to say this, especially right now. We're in the time of the year right now where all these new head coaches come into these programs, and they talk about these conferences so glowingly about, any given week you could be upset and this and that. They have to say these things. You and I both know that when these new head coaches come in. The new head coaches in this conference, they mean it. And they really, there's
absolutely
some truth. There's some truth behind that. And there are for others as well, but there really are for this conference right now. And those numbers are astounding, by the way. I was not fully aware of the extent of those numbers in terms of, getting those calls correct on the targeting specifically. And that is one of the most swing type critical point of game pieces, especially when you talk about the student athlete perspective of being kicked out of that contest. But let's talk about this MIAA football upcoming season, though. Week 0, that was a big addition to the D2 schedule just last year. I know you are in the same boat, have loved what has been able to do when it comes to creative scheduling for these D2 football programs, whether that ends up being a bye for some teams later on in the year or some creative out-of-conference scheduling earlier on. And how has that impacted your conference? I'm going to pull up, you had to put out a great graphic of kind of the overall schedule of some of the squads, what they've been able to put together. How has that impacted the conference as a whole, and how do you see it as a net benefit for the MIAA?
Well, I think it's the best thing that we've done since I've been commissioner, to open up our schedule to non-conference competition and to give fans of small college football these great matchups early in the season. Kobe, you mentioned the margin of error in our conference, and it's real. I like to tell people about the 8 years that I've been the commissioner. 9 out of our 10 football programs, 9 different football programs have either made the playoffs or won a bowl game.
Wow.
So only Missouri Southern during that time frame has not been to a bowl, not won a bowl game, or been to the playoffs. And that shows you that, it's not just, our league's not being just dominated by 1 or 2 schools. And there's a wide, the ability for a wide flip and change. And Missouri Southern, I really like their coach. I really like what they're doing. They're going to be there soon. But what these non-conference games do for us, Kobe, is they allow us to go out and play these other great conferences and teams. Last year, the MIAA and the non-conference games early in the year, we went 16-3. Northwest lost to Minnesota State. Colorado Mines beat Washburn, and I think the game of the year came down to the last minute of the game. Great game in Topeka. And then Midwestern State eked out a win against Missouri Southern. Other than that, the conference went undefeated in the non-conference matchups. And this year we've got a slate of games just incredible. Pitt State is going to play both Ferris State and Grand Valley State in their schedule.
Hell yeah.
I think sandwiched in between those games, I think that they play UCO. So what a start to the year for the
That is
Gorillas.
Outrageous.
Yeah. Pueblo is playing UCM. We've got Colorado Mines and Washburn playing again. Augustana at Midwestern State, or I'm sorry, at Missouri Western. We've got UCO and Texas Permian Basin, Northwest and Minnesota State again. Angelo State's going to get Hayes and Emporia again this year.
Yeah.
These are great games. These are the games that our fans, really fans all over Division II football, want to see. And the non-conference, having the week 0, opening up our schedule to non-conference games, it gives us that opportunity.
And what's wild is with a conference as loaded top to bottom as this is, this would be such an easy opportunity for these coaches and these staffs to go out and cherry pick some of those struggling teams from neighboring conferences. We've seen the exact opposite. Ferris State and Grand Valley are the GLIAC. That's the GLIAC bread and butter right there. And you take from that pool. Then you go to the Lone Star. You're talking about a team like Angelo coming in. Then you're talking about UT Permian Basin coming in. Then you're talking about these other squads that are just the best of the best. Minnesota State, Augustana, both teams that have been in contention for the NSIC. That is absurd to me, and it just shows the level of confidence. And now with this this playoff system here, when you talk about your strength of schedule and these quality wins and the way the NCAA is determining that, these coaches are putting a much higher value on those out-of-conference wins. I love to see it. And to your point, it has greatly benefited, I think, the D2 football more casual fan.
Yeah, and the thing I really appreciate about our coaches, they recognize what the MIAA network means to our member institutions, and to have the best schools in the RMAC playing against Washburn and Hayes.
Yep.
That's gonna bring in a lot of new subscribers to the MIAA network that helps generate revenue directly back to our athletic departments. So our coaches recognize that these are the games that people want to see. These are the games people are going to come and pay to see in person. Absolutely. Or to watch on our network. And, just generates a lot of excitement for D2 football early in the season.
Next topic of discussion for you, and the one that selfishly and admittedly I was the most pumped to talk about, the expansion of the damn playoff. Open the floodgates. Right now we're at 28 teams, 4 super regions, 7 teams in each. We'll talk about the super regions in a second, the way they're being reworked this upcoming season. This system right now, we've seen displeasure is a nice way of saying it across the board from myself, admittedly as well, and I think from a lot of others, but new proposals seemingly can change that. I'll leave it up. I'm going to tee it off. I want you to take it from there. Talk to me about what we could see changing here when it comes to the D2 playoffs, the national scene.
Well, as you know, they got the cart a little before the horse by putting in place an AQ for every conference before the bracket was expanded. Now, I've been told that the promise from Indianapolis and the promise from the governance groups that will make this decision is that this will cause them to act, and we will finally get that expansion from 28 teams to 32 teams in the D2 football bracket. And that, I think it's great, again, for the fans. It'll set up 8 regions or 8 schools per region in the 4 different regions. It'll get rid of the first round bye. Yes. For one of the schools. So all teams will be playing the same number of playoff games to get to the championship. The way the seeding is done in Division II, where basically you're seeding the top 4, and right now 5, 6, 7 aren't seeded, so you have a little wiggle room on matchups. Now it would be 5, 6, 7, 8 aren't seeded, and I hope that lends itself to fewer and fewer first round conference matchups. Yes. We have more flexibility now to avoid, Grand Valley and Ferris State or Missouri Western and Northwest Missouri having to play each other in the first round. So that's a benefit. But yeah, I mean, Kobe, this is something, frankly, that should have been done 3 or 4 years ago. The
Amen.
money has been in the budget. The number of schools that sponsor football has justified this type of a bracket expansion. So it's been frustrating that it hasn't happened, but perhaps we're at a point where this can get approved and this can be implemented soon.
And we've seen the automatic bids, at multiple levels, the D3 level most notably, in that just about every conference at the D3 level, if you win your conference, you're in the dance. There's a lot of stuff that comes with that. And one of the biggest pieces is the very, very tough aspect of getting an at-large bid to the national playoffs. And when it comes to Division II, when you have a much smaller field, right now, currently, obviously, as it sits at 28, you're already having teams that are vying, really quality teams that are vying for those couple extra spots. You look at Super Region 3 just this last year, Saginaw Valley, Central Missouri, two teams that, in a lot of people's eyes, very deserving of going on to a playoff, especially at least a first round, even if it is an unfavorable matchup, very deserving of that spot. They're on the outside looking in. And now you've got this earned access rule that obviously has been taken into a place. Now you've got the automatic qualifier deal. It just feels like that margin of error, it goes back to the margin of error, is smaller and smaller and smaller. Not to put the cart even further ahead of the horse, is 32 enough?
No, it's not. But I'll tell you, with 32, I'm pretty confident that two teams that I saw match up in the Heritage Bowl last December, University of Central Missouri and Texas Permian Basin, that put on a heck of a show.
Absolutely.
In Corsicana, Texas. I think it was a double overtime game. You had the Harlan Hill winner for UCM, a big fourth quarter overtime to bring the Mules back. Those two teams would have been in the playoffs. And, so 32 gives us an opportunity to showcase four more deserving teams. But, Kobe, my big concern or problem is just the unevenness of the regional regional membership. I'm gonna make a bunch of people in the East that watch this mad, but the football in the Midwest and in the South is stronger than it is in the East in Division II football.
Hell yeah,
no question about it. And there are more deserving teams in the Midwest and the South that are being left out of the bracket. So, 32 teams will take it. It should be bigger. But really what I want to see is a change in the way that we bracket and the way that we select teams to be more in line with what Division III and FCS are doing in seeding teams and having at-larges that can come out of different regions. There's a better way to do this for us to make sure we've got a true national championship with the teams that have demonstrated during the year, based on who they play, their strength of schedule, and that they deserve a spot in the playoffs. And hopefully we'll get to that point. But baby steps means we'll get to 32 and we'll appreciate that change.
Hell yeah. And it's all about those criteria that you talked about. I think the term that gets used very often is most deserving, right? We heard it just recently with Lamar and Josh Allen, who is most deserving of the MVP.
Right.
The very same conversation is happening in these rooms. And I think the FCS model is oftentimes referenced because of the outcome, the potential outcomes you can have where you have an NDSU and SDSU playing for it all. That is a really, really unique and neat deal, because if those are the two most deserving teams, that ought to be the championship. Well, that's very black and white, but that's the way that it works. And I think your geographic point is interesting too, because we've seen that across the board. The East and the Northeast has kind of just struggled historically, especially in recent history. At the D3 level, we've seen a bit of a resurgence there. You talk about Cortland and the run that they've been on. Endicott has seen some prominence at the D3 level, a Northeastern type squad. But the D2 level, right now, not talking in the grand scheme, right now, you're correct. Like, that is a factual statement. These regions are producing higher quality football teams based on every single one of those metrics that you just mentioned. So if we don't have a system that reflects our flexibility to incorporate them into our postseason. I say you're the one doing on this, man. I just get to talk about it. But you know how pumped up I get about this. This is an exciting deal.
Well, I can speak with confidence of the strength of the Midwest and the South.
Hell yeah.
Because the schools in the East don't want to come play us. And that's what the non-conference games in week 0 have opened up for the MIAA.
Yeah.
We've been able to go out and try to schedule whoever wants to play whenever you want to play. And, we've got some great games on the schedule this fall. If the MIAA goes out and these great matchups I've talked about, and we go 0-12, we're not a very strong conference. Last year we went 16-3. Pitt State beat Ferris State, and then loses twice in our league. So let's make the East stronger and better, and let's find ways to bring them to Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and schedule some home and homes with some of the MIAA teams, and that'll settle that debate.
Amen. No, I love it. I'm right there with you. I've held you for long enough. I got one more for you though. And it was the super regions for next year. I think that was a big talking point for us as we closed out the 2024 season. The reworked super regions, which kind of felt like, again, maybe just a step in the right direction, maybe not solving the entire issue, but at least kind of picking apart, especially that Super Region 3 issue that has been talked about ad nauseum by everyone. Your conference moved from SR3, placed into Super Region 4. The Great American's coming with you, so you're not escaping Harding and Ouachita and those guys, but I'm sure you guys would have it no other way. The Lone Star, the RMAC, both there as well. Why is this change important in your eyes?
Well, one thing is, a lot of our coaches recruit heavy in Texas. Okay. We've got a lot of schools that spend a lot of time talking to high school student athletes about coming and playing in the MIAA or junior college student athletes in Texas. So, now having an alignment, and I think we used to be there. I think the MIAA used to be lined up with the Lone Star, because I remember some historic matchups with Northwest Missouri State and Abilene Christian, Texas A&M Kingsville, and Pitt State. So I think there was a time where the Lone Star and the MIAA were together, and we're excited about that. Since I left the MIAA, or since I left the NCAA, we've really seen the RMAC as a conference, as a football conference, really improve. Some really quality, really good programs, absolutely, in the RMAC that we look forward to battling with, and we know how strong the Great American Conference is, and so it's going to be. We're not escaping much when we leave Grand Valley and Ferris State behind in a different region. It's gonna be a power region, but I really like the alignment and the states that we're going to be playing against that probably line up more with the states where our coaches are doing a lot of recruiting.
Absolutely, man. All right, like I said before, I've taken enough of your time. You have been awesome. One of my favorite conversations I've had in a long time. You got an open invite back on here whenever you'd like it, sir. I really appreciate your time on here, and can't say enough about you, man.
Toby, I enjoyed it too. We can do this every night if you want. So just holler when you want me back on.
Come on, let's do it. Mike, thank you very much, man. Have a good rest of your night.
You bet. Thank you, Kobe.
See you. All right, huge thank you to Mike for coming on the show. Let's talk about some of these new faces at the helm of pretty prominent D2 football programs across the country, and where better to start than the new guy, quote unquote, air quotes if you're not watching this one, in charge of the ore diggers at Colorado School of Mines, that being Bob Stitt. And I say new guy in the air quotes because this is not his first time leading the program. He has a record of 108-62 during his 15 seasons leading the Mines football program. He first arrived in Golden in 2000. You see the quote right here. This is on his return. He says, quote, "There is no doubt in my mind this is the best job in Division II football." Really strong praise right there from a guy who knows Golden, who knows the landscape, has not just gone into a cave and done some kind of Aaron Rodgers retreat. He's been around the game of football since he left Golden and gone on to coach some pretty impressive teams, even at the Division I level. He is the program's all-time leader in wins when it comes to football over at Mines. In 2004, the Orediggers won their first RMAC title in 46 years and earned the program's first ever NCAA championship berth and postseason win, with him at the helm just 4 years into his stint. He was the RMAC Coach of the Year in 2004, also in 2010, and was the AFCA Regional Coach of the Year in 2004 to go with that. He was really known as one of the first to fully employ kind of the air raid offense, especially at this level at Division II, and really has leaned into that. We've seen Mines go to it, and a lot of that is in part of the talent that they've had at the quarterback and the wide receiver position. We'll talk about kind of what he inherits here, with the Orediggers in terms of personnel going into 2025. But you talk about in recent history what this offense has been able to do with a man like John Matoka under center calling the shots, so to speak, for this Oredigger attack. You talk about two wide receivers this last year on the outside in Shield and McLeod that are pulling down just incredible balls, large catch radius, big-time threats down the middle of the field. And it feels like this coaching style is certainly going to fit in up there with what they've had going on offensively with this Oredigger attack. But what is he picking up with the Orediggers in terms of personnel coming back to pick this team back up, to keep them kind of in the national field, national contention? Because back-to-back years, they made it to the national championship game. Couldn't get it done on the biggest stage. Now, this past year, couldn't even make it out of their own conference. Talk about a team in CSU Pueblo that went on to have a hell of a run. A team like Western Colorado who went on to have some incredible games. So now the national conversation, they're certainly not out of it. A year out of it is nothing. But you talk about now you got to make it out of your own conference now. These are not gimmies inside of conference play. There's some really great teams out there in the RMAC. So offensively for Coach Stitt, by the way, the hashtag with him is #StittHappens. I love that. I was kind of stumbling upon that on Twitter the other day, and I just thought that was hilarious. So need to get that out there. Need to bring that back. Needs to be a thing. I need it on a t-shirt. But besides the point, offensively for the Orediggers going into 2025, their quarterback, Evan Foster, he's graduated. He was the leading passer in 2024, and he wasn't a John Matoka, but that's an unfair comparison. He was a great quarterback in his own right, but you knew the guy picking up the mantle after he left would have been really harshly compared in that same light. So Evan Foster is gone. You also lose one of the best receivers in D2 football, Max McLeod. I mentioned him earlier on. That's a guy that you just can't replace. You can try to replace the production, but you cannot replace a threat and a presence that Max McLeod brings on the outside. Do believe we'll see him playing some professional ball here shortly. You bring back a standout, big target type of guy in Flynn Shield on the outside of the wide receiver position. He was a guy that kind of got elevated and thrust into that role here recently. Again, big-time target, big frame, a guy that makes a lot of big-time catches. But now it's going to be a matter of who's throwing him the ball and what kind of other supporting cast does he have at the offensive skill positions. The backfield running back tandem, former RMAC Freshman of the Year, Landon Walker, he's back. Braylon Tate also back. Landon Walker's a guy that's relatively homegrown type of talent for this Colorado Mines attack and has been a contributor for them year after year. So good to see him take on kind of that more of the bell cow type position of like being the guy and being endorsed as such. They defensively, though, this past season, only had one player in top 20 in the tackles in the conference play. Hayden Gregg was 20th when it came to tackles in the RMAC play. He's graduated. He's gone. Now, that can mean one of two things. I don't want to sit here and say it's a terrible thing. It could mean there's a lack of playmakers on the defensive side, and that probably is partially the case. But what it could also mean from a defensive perspective is that you've got a great balanced scheme in which everyone eats. Everyone gets their plays. Everyone has to play very sound assignment football. When the ball comes their way, they play their assignment. They play it correctly. They make the play. And regardless, you don't have any of these, quote-unquote standout type performers on the defensive side of the ball. I'm sure it's a bit of both. But what I also know about this defense going into 2025 from watching them play last year and just looking at, just numbers and box scores, they struggled to get to the quarterback really, really badly. They were one of the worst in the RMAC, and that was kind of the downfall, I think, partially of this defense is their inability to go and get pressure. So can they address that going into 2025? How do they do that? Is it homegrown talent? Is it in the transfer portal? Is it some new kind of technique or a coaching style? Does he bring in someone from the outside to really harp on that? And you've seen kind of a resurgence or just a surge of these defensive pass specialist branded coaches that are making waves at the college football scene across all levels, but struggling to get to the quarterback. That's a big piece for them. Another one, generating turnovers. They were one of the worst in the RMAC. 7 interceptions last year, 4 forced fumbles. I believe only 3 of those were recovered by their defense. So when you have 10 takeaways on the year, that's not good enough, especially when you're going to be in these games. We talked about the CSU Pueblos and the Westerns of the world. You want to make it into the playoffs and go on a deep run with this Mines team. You're going to have to generate more turnovers than that. They've not been able to do that in the past. And then finally, the note for them is, at least for me, and this has been kind of the topic of national conversation, if you've seen some of the national coverage on these guys, you got to get bigger, you got to get stronger, you got to get faster at the line of scrimmage, at the point of attack. If you want to go into the playoffs, you want to make a run, you got to have depth, of course, but when you're going up against the Super Region 3 teams are always the one that are the forefront of the conversation. Ferris State, Grand Valley, Harding, Pittsburgh State. What do you associate with that brand of football? It is just punch you in the mouth, downhill, physical run attack. And we've seen balance from those teams too. Like, they can do it in a lot of different ways. But Super Region 3 is always the forefront of that conversation. Mines has been shown up on the biggest stage because of that fact and also because of scheme and I'm sure a variety of other issues. But if you're Coach Stitt and you've followed this program, which I'm sure he has, and you've followed where their weaknesses have been in the past, addressing the line of scrimmage to be able to compete with those national powers. But like I said, you still have to get out of the conference. There's great football being played in the RMAC right now, and Mines is no longer a shoo-in just to go win it outright. So very excited, though. I mean, and all in all, like, really excited. Everything that I've heard and seen about this guy is glowingly positive. He seems to have made some really great lasting connections in that community. So I'm excited to see him head up that program once again. Let's go down to the MIAA. Talked about it a little bit with Mike. Northwest Missouri State, they're bringing in John McMenamin. And this is a guy that graduated from Northwest, I believe played quarterback there. And he's the 21st head coach in school history for the Bearcats. Played quarterback, coaches quarterbacks currently as well. Interesting note on this one when it comes to the hire and kind of the standard and the bar that is Northwest Missouri State football for the Bearcats. Their previous head coach, Rich Wright, they did not renew his contract. He's not technically fired, but they didn't bring him back, did not renew the contract. They wanted to go a different direction. Very amicable, happens all the time in any profession. After 8 seasons, his record, he was top 10 amongst coaches that were 5 years or later in. 65-22. He was top 10 in winning percentage. Sorry to finish off that thought. He was 65-22, and they let him walk after 8 years. That was 8 years as being a head coach. He was involved with the program for over 20 years on staff. But, Rich Wright couldn't get it done in the playoffs as of late when it came to the later part of his tenure, and I think the Bearcats felt the bar was higher for this team, this program, the tradition that is Northwest football. What they've been able to do in the past, the bar has been set so unbelievably high that even that is not good enough. So, on one hand, Coach McMenamin is coming into a situation where, and he knows it, he played it, he lived it, where you've got some of the best support, some of the best community, some of the best facilities, some of the best tradition and culture and history in Division II college football, and college football in general, the way they've been able to win and do it at a consistently high level. On the other hand, you have this set of expectations in this bar that is, there's no year zero. There's no adjustment period. You don't get to come in here and have a mediocre record and explain that I'm really trying to get the guys going and install culture and do this and that. No. You're expected to come in right away and experience success in what is right now Division II football's toughest conference in the country. And you're expected to do it right away. So there's 2 very different sides of that. Now, what he has going for him coming into this role, is a wealth of experience. Talked about playing at the D2 level. He's coached the D2 level as well. Head coach at Wayne State, Nebraska over in the NSIC. He was the offensive coordinator at Central Missouri, MIAA foe there. They were the number 2 ranked offense in D2 during his stint with the Mules. That seems pretty important. But another big-time piece is going and coaching at a higher level and bringing back some of those important pieces, to your school. He was a co-offensive coordinator at Tulane, a program that saw one of the biggest turnarounds in the nation in college football and has really made a jump onto the national scenes. You talk about that experience and what he brings back to the Bearcats, especially offensively. He's an offensive-minded coach. I mean, there's no denying that. But just as a team, what he takes away from, one, having the head coaching experience at the D2 level already. The NSIC is no joke of a conference. Talking about already coaching in the MIAA over at Central Missouri, who's one of the better teams inside of this conference. And then you talk about the experience at Tulane at a higher level, bringing back some of those pieces. We're very interested to see what the rhetoric is about Coach heading into the offseason and to see what the energy level is like for this Northwest team going into 2025. Because you talk about some of these games they got early on, man. You look back just this last year, that Week 0 game against Mankato, who we know is just a perennial playoff power. They're not pulling any punches when it comes to scheduling down there for the Bearcats. But we'll keep going. Excuse me. Another big-time job at Valdosta State. Now, we know, if you guys have watched this show or really watched anything, their head coach, Tremaine Jackson, after bringing them to the national championship, he leaves and goes to Division I HBCU Prairie View A&M. The next in line for the Blazers, that's their former offensive coordinator, Graham Craig. And they hire internal after a trip to the national championship. You figure if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But in all honesty, this guy has been in charge of and has commandeered some of the best offenses in the country, much in part to the playmakers that he's had. And I think he'd be the first one to tell you that. But you can never give enough credit to the guy with the playbook on the sideline, the guy calling the shots. And Coach Craig is the newest head coach at Valdosta State. Pretty relatively young head coach. Here's the turnout for, I believe, that is his introductory presser there down in Titletown, Georgia. But big-time news for them. And you talk about a more wealth of experience for this guy who's a quarterback coach at Memphis, offensive coordinator at West Georgia, when they were D2. Now they've made the jump to D1 now, but they used to be a Gulf South foe down there. Now, Coach Craig, he's got a great track record. I think this is really the most important piece and what I've picked up on of developing quarterbacks into top-level performers. You look at where he's been, he seemingly has done that at every level. And he's been, people talk about like a quarterback whisperer, like O'Connell in the NFL or McVay or some of these like offensive minds. I think the term is kind of bogus, but what I know about this guy is that wherever he is, the quarterbacks seem to find their ceiling. And that means he's maximizing the potential of the guys that he has in that room. He's not maybe making them superstars, but he's getting the most out of them. I think he's been able to do that at a lot of different stops. Sammy Edwards, just the latest instance of this, the signal caller for the Blazers, who went on to have an All-American caliber Heisman finalist type of season. He's done it every step of the way. So I'm really excited to see what he does. The Blazers admittedly lose a lot to the portal after Coach Jackson's absence. He leaves. He poaches some of their best guys on that roster. We'll see how he fills those voids, especially at the quarterback position, at the wide receiver position, losing a guy like Ronnie Bullard and some of those other guys on the outside. But I wanted to leave you with this. It was a quote from the former head coach, Tremaine Jackson, about the state of D2 football, of many D2 teams, but Valdosta State in particular. He says here, quote, "This program is not fully funded. The only team in the conference without fully funded scholarships. They only got 22. There's not a single player on this roster who has a full scholarship. Not their All-American quarterback, nobody. But they figure it out and they get it done." And I really think this is eye-opening to a lot of people. That quote comes after their semifinal win to send them to the national championship game, which is a really cool piece. But I think that quote opens the eyes of many in that they assume that all these Division II teams, because they have 36 equivalencies of the school's tuition to give out, they automatically have that. That is very much not the case for a lot of Division II schools. And that's why we've seen a lot of restructuring of teams in different conferences and moving and a lot of different struggles when it comes to competing with some of those national powers. Valdosta State, I think that was kind of one of the schools that I would at least expect when you talk about their history and their tradition when it comes to the football program. But I think that's very eye-opening, and I definitely want to make that known as Coach Craig takes over, and that's just another hurdle that he has to overcome as the head coach for the Blazers, is that you are not dealing with nearly as much money as some of these other fully funded programs. He said it right there. Just as of last year, the only school in the conference, to his knowledge, that is not fully funded. So you're talking about a 14 scholarship difference. That's huge. That's huge. And for those not familiar, Division II schools get 36 equivalencies of the school's tuition. They can divide that amongst their entire roster. They do a lot of partials. You don't typically see a ton of full ride scholarships at the D2 level because kids will get money from FAFSA or academic money, and that kind of fills in the difference. But very interesting kind of set of criteria there, and I wanted to make sure that was known before we really finished off in that conversation. Now, I want to stay in the Gulf South right here. I want to go over to what I would call one of the quiet powers of the South, that being West Alabama. And this is the video that they dropped on their Twitter, welcoming in the man right there, Scott Cochran, who is going to be the new head coach of West Alabama football, UWA. And I think what's really interesting about this hire for me, he's got a very different background than most coaches, at least in this stage of his career. A lot of experience as a strength and conditioning coach at LSU, Alabama, among others. And when you say those two names, who do you associate with those two schools? Yeah, he worked with them at both spots. Coach Saban was a part of those staffs when Scott was at both of those institutions. And obviously, I'm assuming has been a very formative part and portion of his coaching philosophy and getting him to this point now. He was a special teams coach at Georgia recently. He's dedicated his time to traveling across the country, speaking to athletes and organizations as part of his nonprofit, the American Addiction Recovery Association. So a very cool non-football fact I thought was really neat they included in kind of his opening introductory, sense of paragraph and release right there. And just seems, again, from everything I've seen, seems to be a lot of optimism about this hire. Another program that is not in the dumps whatsoever has just finished 2024 9-2 last year. This UWA team has, like I said, been a quiet power down south, and that they maybe have not had the most amazing success as a very recent history on the national stage. Because you talk about teams in their conference like Valdosta, like West Florida, that have maybe taken a little bit of that spotlight. They've been right there. They're very much in the running for that same kind of caliber of team. They beat West Florida last year. A little bit of a down year for the Argonauts, you could argue. We got robbed of a great potential game happening between them and Valdosta because of the hurricane, which I was very not excited about at all. But for Coach here, I think this is a very, very great opportunity for him to go in and to bring this program to the next level. And this has got to be one of the more appealing jobs when it comes to the D2 football level. When you talk about the geographic landscape of where West Alabama is located, you talk about the selling points and also just the winning. Like, there's not a lot of head coaching jobs open right now where they're coming off of a 9-2 season. There's not a lot of head coaching jobs where you've been in the plus the last couple of years. That's not usually why people move on from head coaches. So I think there's a lot of upside to this job. I'm excited to see what he does with it. But like I said earlier, a lot more D2 head coach openings than what I've just mentioned. Let me know in the comments who else I should definitely cover, dive into. I'd like to get to all of them. I'd like to have them all on the show. Let's see if we can make that happen. But without much more ado, we'll keep it moving. Let's talk about another piece that kind of has some D2 implications. That being the Monumental matchup. And that's something that I was not really aware of, right? Not really aware of until this last week. Here's a little bit of what you can take a peek at right here. I talked about an in-state rivalry between a D2 team and an NAIA team in the opener. Well, this is it. The Monumental matchup is the Division II University of Indianapolis taking on NAIA Marian. They're bringing back their rivalry game. The last time they played it was in 2016. Now, they've only had 2 of these games so far. Shockingly enough, Marian won them both. The NAIA team took them down both, at least from what I could see, which I thought I double-checked. I was like, that seems very interesting. But this is interesting and unique because it's Indianapolis' only 2 scholarship-level football teams. And so it makes for a really unique geographic rivalry that seemingly would be very natural. And so now we're bringing this back. I had no part in it. They are bringing this back since 2016. Those are the only 2 games that have been played. In 2015 and 16, Marian won both of those. The Knights from Marian, they went 8-2 last year. They play in a really tough conference. Defensively, they've been really fun to follow along with. We've posted quite a bit about their defensive backfield in recent memory. A lot of turnovers, and just the way they've been able to hawk to the ball defensively has been impressive. The Greyhounds, though, on the other side of things, they were no slouch either. Now, the biggest knock on them, they were 10-2 last year. They come out of the GLVC, and they lose in the first round of the playoffs. It's just what happens with the Greyhounds right now. But when you talk about the regular season, they still have beat a lot of quality football teams, and 10-2 at any level is incredibly impressive. So you've got 2 teams that right now are at the up, right? I wouldn't say they're at their peak, but they're certainly at the up. These programs are both at pretty good spots for their respective levels. And so I'm excited for this to come back. I don't have too much information on it right now, but we do know that Marian takes on UIndy Thursday, August 28th to open the 2025 season. That'll be a week 0 type matchup right there. And that'll be at 6:05 p.m. Ascension State, Street. Whatever it is, man. But excited for this. Thought it was a cool piece of news that I would definitely bring up before we transitioned over. So that's kind of it for the D2 level. Let's go over, get Jimmy and the boys included, talk some D3 football on the pod. We're bringing on the closer to finish out the pod. D3 football, a lot of big-time news coming with coaching hires, but also some cool headlines around the Super Bowl. Here to talk about it is Jimmy Martin. What's up, dude?
How we doing, Kobe? Good to be back.
Dude, excited to be back on here. A break is nice, but what's even better is getting right back into it.
Yes, I'm right there with you.
100%. So let's start tonight off talking about the Super Bowl and nothing to do with the play, because to be honest with you, I watched almost none of it, especially the way that thing started out. But you talk about the Division III roots that had an impact on this year's Super Bowl. This guy, Nick Sirianni, was at the forefront of a lot of that conversation. The Eagles head coach, he was a former football student, athlete, and a coach at Mount Union, and I think that got covered a lot throughout the course of the week. But as I go through this slideshow, the sweep that was posted by the NCAA and Division III here, you see Spagnuolo from the Chiefs, the defensive coordinator, who was a student athlete at Springfield, who had a hell of a run this year. You keep going down the list. And here's the quarterback's coach from Kansas City, who was at Geneva. And then you keep going on. Baldwin Wallace, the Eagles safety coach. And Dan Williams, the Chiefs quality control and assistant quarterback's coach, played at Stevenson. Keep going down. And their assistant O-line coach was at Williamette. And Kevin Saxton, the big lefty, was at Emory and Henry when they were Division III. I think that was before they made the jump to D2. A D3 hockey tie-in here with their research analyst. And finally, Tyler Brown, former football student athlete at Rowan, and Nick Cassetta, who was at Montclair State. So that's a ton of names rifled off right there, Jimmy. But what's really neat about that is all these guys have really influential ties to the Super Bowl teams, but none of them played on Sunday.
Yeah. It just goes to show you that there's so many aspects of the game, like outside of the players, that have a huge impact, like coaching. And it doesn't really matter where you come from either. Like, you know how we always say it doesn't matter if you're at a small school, they'll still find you. It's the same thing with coaches. You know, you got to think about it the same way.
And that's actually exactly what Mike Racy and I had talked about earlier on. He basically said the same words as you, man, and that the old adage is like, it doesn't matter where you are. If you're good enough, they'll find you. And it really does transcend just playing. For these guys, it was coaching, or it could be for administrators. It could be for referees, like we had talked about. All of those things can be very true. And I did have a couple clips here to hear from Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo about their time at small school football. So let's start things off here with who else?
Staff, including your DC. Is that a requirement to be on your staff, to have the Division III background? And what is about Division III that gets them ready for this level?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to start on the Division II non-scholarship San Francisco State when they still had football. So I understand all that.
Yeah.
And what you do is you build a foundation doing that. Selling hot dogs every Tuesday and Thursday and having enough money, to feed the guys during training camp. So it shows you certain things. Not everybody gets that opportunity. The ones that do really appreciate this even more than the guys that really appreciate it.
Coach, Division III football runs deep on your staff, including your DC.
So really neat piece right there. And then there was another one that I wanted to bring up, also from the Chiefs. And Sirianni had a soundbite too, but it was I thought these ones were a little bit better and kind of describing the experience at the D3 level. Here is Steve Spagnuolo, the defensive coordinator from Kansas City.
It all kind of began there at Springfield College, and from my time in high school to Springfield. And listen, way back then, that was the mecca of coaches coming. A lot of college coaches, and then guys that eventually ended up in the NFL. I was blessed to have things happen the way I did, but I owe a lot to the foundation that was built with Howie Vandersee, was our head coach at the time. And all the people there were at Springfield College, Massachusetts. Loved it.
Sirianni, obviously D3 product from
Yeah,
Mount Union.
yeah, it's great to see.
Does that give you really more respect, because you know what it takes?
Well, I think, listen, the profession we're in at the core is teaching, and those schools prepared you to teach and teach the game of football. So I'm glad I was able to go through that experience.
What do you tell prospective student athletes that are like?
Probably the coolest piece, Jimmy Spagnuolo talks about the schools at lower levels preparing the coaches to teach may be better than even at the highest of levels. And he talks about the profession at its core being that of teaching, right? Coaching is teaching. It's teaching your players and a lot of relationships and all these other, schematics and other deals as well. But when it comes down to it, it's teaching. And how well can you convey information to others? And I love his piece and his argument that some of these smaller schools really do prepare that teaching component, maybe even better than the larger institutions that have all the auxiliary services and assistant coaches here, and GAs running around and fulfilling all these different needs. And Coach Andy Reid talks about selling hot dogs during the week, as an extra little fundraiser, and just all the different hats that small school coaches wear. So some really cool pieces from both of them. Also wild that maybe not even a coincidence that these guys have kind of joined up having those kind of backgrounds.
Yeah, no, that's super, super cool stuff. Maybe we can get him on the show. I mean, hey.
Dude, if we had Andy Reid on the show, that would be, yeah. Go ahead. You got that on the.
I got
you.
Yeah. I can make it happen. Let's do it.
All right. All right. That would be incredible. But
I
definitely wanted to
speed dial, man.
Definitely wanted to highlight those guys because it's such a neat way of highlighting this stage. I know Sirianni have been talked about a lot throughout the course of the week, and rightfully so. But I think hearing their perspectives is really neat and kind of their roots there. But let's go back to the D3 of now and more of your neck of the woods in the WIAC. We got some coaches that are having some changes of scenery. It's going to shake up the conference as we know it. And one that you're very, very familiar with, Coach Yagi, going from being the offensive coordinator at Stout for the Blue Devils, he's heading over, joining the lacrosse gang over there, and that's a big lateral move for him. What do you have to say about that?
I'm happy for him. He went to lacrosse, played there. When I saw there was an opening at the position, I was like, oh, I maybe had a funny feeling that might have happened, but yeah. I'm really happy for him though. I already reached out to him and everything, but no, yeah, that was something else. We had a really good year on offense this year. Obviously third in the WIAC scoring. We had our school record in scoring this year as well. About 6 yards a play, almost 400 yards a game, and a lot of explosive playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. So shout out to Coach Yagi. I'm happy for him. So
I would say a lot of that much in part due to him, and a great split. I mean, roughly 40-60 run to pass for you guys this last year, and Stout's bringing back a lot on some good pieces, I should say, on offense. We'll talk about that in a minute, but what he's inheriting offensively at lacrosse, I think, is kind of a bigger piece of that, is what that offensive mind can do with what currently exists at lacrosse. And, of course, they're going to supplement that with another great class of incoming freshmen, high school, some big transfers that they've done in the past. The forefront is Gabe Lynch, man, the running back, that backfield, the predominant piece of the backfield for the Eagles. He had 1,000 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns this last year. He's back in 2025. From everything that I can tell, he will be back in the backfield for the Eagles this coming fall, and he's been absolutely dangerous. He's an do-it-everything type of back. He's a three-down guy that I don't think has any glaring weaknesses and terrorized a lot of the WIAC defenses this last year. Their leading passer, Kyle Haas, is back for year 2 with the Eagles after transferring from D2 Winona State. The big piece, though, you and I have talked about him a lot on this show, man. Jack Studer, the senior wide receiver, had over 1,000 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. He's one of the best in D3 football, made a bunch of circus catches over the last couple of years. They lose him on the outside, but I'd say that's a decent piece of some offensive skill coming back that are going to be some core fundamental pieces of that Eagle offense going forward.
Yeah, lacrosse always reloads, too. Like, no matter who they lose, they'll just throw in some other kid who's really good, too. So, I think he's going to be pretty hyped for this opportunity he has here. So it's pretty cool stuff.
No, absolutely. And I think I'm excited to see what they do, especially, kind of with that transfer area, because they brought in Haas being one of them. They brought in a couple of guys from Winona State that ended up being some key contributors for them. Defensively brought in some transfers from the D2 level as well. So how will they supplement both those sides of the ball with some transfer portal additions? They don't go incredibly heavy into that. They're not reliant on the portal, I think, by any means, but they certainly are not afraid to go in there and get some pieces, which I think is important, especially if you want to be competitive at the highest level. But also in the WIAC, making a different move, Nick Pesic goes from being the play caller at Whitewater coming over to join the Blue Devils in Stout, my friend.
Yeah, so it's funny because Pesic left like 3 months before I got here, and now he's back like after I'm done. So I literally just like every year he was gone, I was here. So I think he must have just not liked me or something. I don't know. But no, yeah, Peshek's back. Really, really good run game at Whitewater. So he'll probably incorporate a little bit more of a run game here, being that we only ran about 40% of the time. Maybe expect him to like start recruiting running backs or like whatever. Who knows? But he's definitely going to run the ball a lot here because that was just the whole obviously pound the rock over at Whitewater.
Yeah, that's been our identity for a long time. Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think my boy Adam Moen is going to run the ball a little bit more this year too because he's got some really, really good like running abilities that didn't necessarily get to be shown on full display this year just because we were throwing the ball. So though he did have a really good year running the ball, like it could get dangerous over here in Menominee with Moen running the ball more.
Oh, yeah, you look at 2024, the WIAC standings, and the Warhawks are the best rushing offense in the league this last year. A lot of that goes to solid offensive line play, a dude in the backfield you might know in Tamir Thomas, who is an absolute dog. But when I looked at their spread of their returning leaders and those kind of rushing category leaders, I noticed the offense had 5 different players with over 200 rushing yards over the course of the season, and I honestly thought going into that Tamir Thomas would have dominated a lot more in that category. He was still their leading rusher by a decent margin, and his playmaking ability on Saturdays is pretty hard to miss. But the balance offensively for them out of the backfield was something that I think is a very great mark of a talented mind, is that you can get more than one great playmaker incorporated, right? I think all offenses at the end of the day is getting your playmakers the ball in space. He's been able to do that not only with maybe his number 1 guy, but his 2 and 3 and 4, and make opportunities for the other pieces of the offense. And I'll kind of pose the same question. And what does he inherit offensively at Stout? You talked about Moen there at the quarterback position. What else is he getting from this Blue Devil attack coming back in 2025?
I mean, you got a kid like Devontae Evans. You can just throw it up to him. And, it's one of those memes. It's like, fuck it. Von's down there somewhere. That's what we would say at practice. Like, we'd be like, fuck it. Von's down there somewhere and just chuck it. Like, myself.
I love the brief second of, like, the
should I say it? Yeah. No, but no, like, actually, if it was like one-on-ones or something, and, like, I just wanted to chuck it deep, I would just be like, oh, is Von up? I'm just going to throw it to him. Chuck it up to him. But no, we got a lot of playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. I'm going to leave some sleepers under the rug here and not give away any information for the Blue Devils. But everyone knows about Von already. So
yeah, sure.
Obvious.
What about the trenches? What does that group look like heading into this fall?
So we're losing a couple. We're losing a couple offensive linemen, but a kid look for Ben Bistel. Keep your eye on him. He started this year as I think he was a freshman too. Either a freshman or a gray shirt freshman, as in like this is his second year, but his first year of eligibility. But no, I expect big things out of him. I think he's going to have a really, really good college football career. Ben Bistel. Also a really good baseball player, but I don't think he's playing at Stout. So,
all right. Fair enough. Another big piece, when it comes to hiring news, we got some news out of the OAC in that Marietta has got a new guy at the helm of their program. And this is an interesting one that I definitely wanted to bring up on the show. Tom Kaufman is the new head coach over there at Marietta. And I think this is worthwhile for a couple of reasons. I think, one, talking about their team this last year, you look at a Marietta team that really, I think, exceeded a lot of expectations in 2024 and kind of set the bar for where this program wants to be at. They finished 8-3, and going into the last 2 weeks of the season, they had one loss earlier on, they were undefeated all the way until the last 2 weeks of the season. You lose by 1 touchdown at Mount Union, a top 5 team in the country, consensus one of the powers of D3 football. Then you go on the road again and lose at John Carroll by 2 scores, and you get bounced in the extra points bowl against Westminster. But you talk about this team and how close they are to really upending the OAC and making some real noise. That Mount Union game is one that I'm always going to go back to. But that's what makes part of this conversation interesting. The other part of it is Tom Kaufman and the experience that he brings to this program. It's a little unorthodox, and that the timeline is maybe a little bit different. Because when I start by saying this, Jimmy, in that he was named a top recruiter in the MAC in 2020 in his time at Kent State by 24/7 Sports, that's a pretty cool accomplishment. And the fact that he was at Kent State in a coordinator role as a defensive coordinator and associate head coach, also at Chattanooga as a DC, special teams coordinator at Syracuse, who's at Bowling Green, Eastern Illinois, worked on the coaching staffs at Texas, Kansas, Mississippi State. Like, go down the list. He's got OAC experience at Heidelberg. He also, most recently, when it comes to college experience, was at John Carroll in 2022 as the DC there. But with all that being said, what was he doing this last year? He was coaching high school ball. And I think that's just a very interesting deal. You've got this guy who has coached almost every corner of college football from FBS down to high school. And now from that wealth of experience, I'm not sure, I couldn't find too much info on if he just wanted to change of pace. Maybe there's some kind of family or local ties there. But he's coming back to the college ranks to take the head job at Marietta. And I think that was just a very interesting deal. What do you make of that?
Hey, I mean, if this guy wants to go be a head coach, God bless him. I'm excited for him. This is really cool. I am looking forward to see what kind of staff he brings into. If he keeps the staff as his new staff, I think that's going to be really interesting to look at, because being that he knows so many different coaches throughout college football, he could just come in here and assemble the Avengers and just take over the football. Because the X's and the Jimmy and Joe's matter more than the X's and O's, but you can scheme up or something really good every single week and you can give yourself a way better chance to win. I think this might be very, very possible.
I agree that the connections are really important. Because you think about it, that tree that he has now of all these connections and at least people he's met along the way should be very valuable. The two things working against him right now, Jimmy, one is the level. You talk about he's got these guys at Kent State, at Bowling Green, at Syracuse, at this, that, and whatever. How many of those guys are willing to take an assistant job at a Division III institution? That's going to be a part of it. That's probably a tough sell. The other piece is the timeline. And I think that's the note that I have right down right here is that, is this the worst time to bring in a new head coach? And that you're pretty late to the dance here. You're pretty late in the process, and that a lot of these guys that are these promising coaching candidates at a multitude of positions have been scooped up by a lot of different coaches in a lot of different places. So now, not to say you're picking from the island of misfit toys, but you just don't have the variety of options that you would have had maybe a month or so ago. And I think the timeline piece to continue along that, post-signing day, trying to keep guys around. It sounds like from Kaufman's initial release and presser, he praised their interim head coach for keeping that core nucleus of guys pretty motivated. So from the outside looking in, it didn't seem like they lost a ton of stragglers to the portal or to external factors. But when you talk about assembling a staff, there were only 2 assistant coaches mentioned in the release that he was very excited about keeping on. It doesn't mean he's just going to go chopping block and get rid of everyone else, because when you take to Twitter, you see a lot of these current assistant coaches endorsing him as the next head football coach. And if that guy just got you out of a job, usually you're not going to go tweet glowingly about him.
Yeah, true. That's
right?
a good point. That's a good point.
So, again, from the outside looking in, from what research I could do, it would appear that Marietta is going to be keeping the bulk of their support staff in those assistant roles. And that can be sometimes easier said than done when you have a new guy coming in with a lot of new ideas and maybe a new culture that he wants to instill in a program that's had success. It might be easier to come into a Marietta that was 3-8 instead of 8-3 and say, hey, we have to change X, Y, Z. Because then, we have to do something to experience the success. But coming off the year that they've just had, and the success that they've just experienced, I think those conversations might not go as easily.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
So, and not to say he's coming in with a radical new approach. I have no idea. So thankfully for him, he gets in spring ball, if nothing else, to get the early install going with his guys, get the culture established. But Marietta is a team that we'll definitely have to follow, because I don't think we put enough respect on them last year, the start of the season they had in the OAC. And the OAC is a conference that's pretty top-heavy, but I think now we can include Marietta in that top echelon, that top tier of the conference, which is an exciting deal for them. It adds depth. And if I'm not mistaken, is John Carroll out of that conference this year?
I think they are. Didn't they move?
Yes, that is correct. They announced their departure from the OAC on January 18th of last year. They're joining the NCAC in the fall of 25. So you've gotten rid of one of the kind of the blue bloods of the conference, so to speak, one of the better teams that's really competed with Mount Union. And it seems like Marietta, it could potentially be poised to take on the second in command type of role in the conference.
Yeah, I don't see why they couldn't. I definitely don't see why they could not pull that off.
It is an interesting move. I kind of forgot about that John Carroll was out of there. I had to double check that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of all the notes I had on him. And to close this thing out, Jimmy, we took a little bit of a break. Obviously, this happened a few weeks ago, probably closer to a month ago. We had a D3 lineman show out at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and this is an exciting one, man. This is a really exciting deal. And Thomas Perry is his name. He's 6'3", 317 pounds, according to the roster. They've taken to calling him Thomas the Tank. I'm going to show you why. It's because he has been doing some pretty ridiculous stuff to Power 5 competition. And this is, again, this video is not like new by any means, but here's Thomas Perry taking on an interior defensive lineman from Georgia, whose name of which I don't have pulled up right in front of me. But look at this guy. I mean, he's been praised as one of the strongest interior offensive linemen in this draft class, with obviously some of the footwork and other deals that come along with that. Might not have incredible measurables like most guys coming out of small school football, but when you put the tape on and you watch what he's been able to do, I see a lot of coaches who were just glowing about this guy. The difference and the strides that he made from day 1 to like day 4 of the East-West Shrine Bowl practices. They said each and every day he came in and just got better. That's an exciting deal, man.
Yeah, it is. You know, the ability to be coachable and like become better like from what they tell you to do is like a very desirable trait among scouts, I have to imagine.
I think it's kind of underappreciated in that we see it a lot at the high school to college level, where a college coach will take a really raw prospect, bring them in, mold them, turn them into a great player. It doesn't happen as much at the NFL because they've had those 4, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 6 years to really develop into a polished player. There's still instances of guys who go on into the NFL and continue to grow into their body, to grow into a scheme, to learn different fundamentals and really shore up some of their weaknesses that they have individually as players. This guy right here, let me go down the list of accolades for Thomas the Tank here. He was an AFCA All-American first team selection, first team all-conference, obviously, all-region. He's the first Middlebury player to be invited to the East-West Shrine Bowl. He was a D3Football.com All-American 4th team, which feels interesting in retrospect. He was on the Reese Senior Bowl watch list, a Walter Camp Division III All-American. He was an academic All-District and an SCAC All-Academic team as well. So, gets it done in the classroom, gets it done in the field. I think prime example of what we've come to associate with a D3 athlete. And what was really cool, Jimmy, if you saw the tweet, was all of his coaches came out for the East-West Shrine Bowl as well. It looked like they had damn near the whole staff was there, dude. And like I said, he's the first player in Middlebury school history to get an invite.
That's really cool. That is wicked.
Yeah, that's awesome. So to build off of that, I mean, you know exactly where I'm going with this one. What was the last time we saw a guy coming from this type of situation with this type of film and this type of buzz?
Quinn Miners, who just got an $80 million contract.
Boom.
So, yeah. Thomas the Tank, I hope you get an $80 million contract one day.
Oh, look, you know what, Thomas? I hope you get a $90 million contract.
100. I want you to get 100. I want 100.
Quinn Miners is the guy, man. And you talk about just, it feels like just yesterday, it really wasn't. I mean, this dude's been playing in the league for quite a few years now. He's made a home for himself out there in Denver with the Broncos. But you look at this guy and what he was able to do at the Reese Senior Bowl and just put his school, put his conference, put D3 on the map in so many ways. He's manhandling this Power 5 competition. And he did it along every stretch of the way, went out and showed out in the workouts as well. And I think that was one thing is like, okay, he can do X, Y, and Z. Can he run a good 40? Does he have a good 3-cone? What's his bench press and his vertical and what? He knocked out every question mark along the way and went on to now is already having a fantastic NFL career. And if we're going to do one of those comparisons like you talked about, you know, a then versus now type of deal, I mean, we tweeted about it way back when the deal actually happened. You already mentioned it earlier on. 4 years, $80 million with the Denver Broncos. This could be a 1 in a million type of deal. Is it a 2 in a million? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, but I was doing this earlier because like all that combine stuff,
right?
That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean Jack Italy. Jack Italy to me, dude. Especially with like linemen and stuff. Like you just got to go out there and like break the other guy's will. That's your job as a lineman. Like you know what I mean? So
they say the hardest thing in professional sports is moving another grown man against his will.
Yeah.
Or hitting a fastball. That's up there too.
Yeah, I think hitting a fastball might statistically be harder, but objectively, you know, you can just whatever you want to say.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, dude. But no, that's really exciting. I think we'll have to do maybe more of a deep dive on him, but I wanted to just like we needed to talk about that today because that was such a cool deal for small school football.
Very cool.
And it admittedly we're late to the party, right? Like this has been something that's been posted about and been talked about. But I'd be remiss if we did not talk about that, Jim. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, needed to be done.
Hell yeah. But that's all for tonight's episode. We'll be back next week. We're going to talk some like really solid, prominent D1 or week 1 D3 matchups.
There you go.
And, we'll get some other content going as well. We'll have some fun ideas. But glad to be back on the saddle, dude. Glad to have you back with me.
Always happy to be back, man. Always happy to be back.
Sweet. All right, brother. I'll see you. Love the t-shirt.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. You got it. So.